Good evening, boys and girls. I'm here in the living room with my dog Socks. I don't know if you can see her. She's right here. Do you see her? And I want to read you a story. And I'm going to read out of my collection of Greek myths. And Greek myths, they're really neat stories. They tell us how some things came to be. Are they true? No, they're myths. But I wanted to read you some of my favorites. So the author says retold by Heather Emery, as she was told, and it's illustrated by Linda Edwards. So I have a table of contents in here, and it talks about the Greek myths. So I'm going to read you this part right here, the introduction that tells you about Greek myths and how they came to be. The Greeks, who lived thousands of years ago, had wonderful stories to tell about gods, monsters, and brave heroes. They believed the gods and goddesses lived all around them, in the fields, in woods, in the sea, under the ground, and in great palaces among the towering peaks of Mount Olympus. Sometimes the Greeks could see the gods and goddesses. Sometimes they were invisible. They could be kind and helpful to the people they liked, but they could also be mean and spiteful, playing nasty tricks and appearing when least expected. In the magical world of Greek myths, ordinary mortals are caught up in extraordinary events. Foolish and wicked people are punished, but the brave and daring are richly rewarded. Read on and enjoy these fascinating ancient stories which have stood the test of time. So one of my favorites is it's about Persephone. So it's called Persephone and the Seasons. And I can look here, I know this is backwards, but it starts on page 12. So I'm going to read to you about Persephone and the seasons. And this is going to tell us how the Greeks think the seasons came to be. I'm going to just get a little more comfortable. One bright morning, the goddess Demeter said goodbye to her daughter Persephone. "I'll be back for supper," she called. Demeter was the goddess of all the plants in the world. She made sure the corn grew tall in the fields and that fruit ripened on the trees. The weather was always fine and there were harvests all the year. After her mother had gone, Persephone went out to meet her friends and pick flowers with them. Searching for the very best lily, she wandered away and was soon on her own. Suddenly, she heard a noise and looked up. She saw a chariot pulled by 4 black horses driven by Pluto. Now, this is not Pluto from the world of Disney. This is another Greek god. Pluto was the god of the underworld. Pluto had fallen in love with Persephone, but knew Demeter would never allow him to marry her daughter. Before Persephone could scream, Pluto dragged her into the chariot and raced away. As they thundered across the ground, a huge cleft opened. Pluto drove straight down it, and the ground closed up behind them. He and Persephone had disappeared into the underworld. When Demeter came back that evening, she called to Persephone, but there was no reply. The house was empty. When it grew dark, Demeter began to worry. Where could Persephone be? At midnight, she lit a flaming torch and set out to look for her. All night she searched, calling, "Persephone, Persephone, where are you, Persephone?" But there was no answer. For 9 days and 9 nights, Demeter searched, not stopping to sleep or even to eat. Dressed in black instead of her usual bright clothes, Demeter wandered all over the country as a haggard old woman. Because she no longer looked after the crops, the corn rotted in the fields. No fruit ripened on the trees, and the grass turned brown. There was nothing for the sheep and goats to eat, and all the people grew short of food. Soon they were near to starving. Does this remind you of a season that we have during our year when there's no fruit on the trees and the grass turns brown? Well, Zeus, you know who Zeus is. He's the big god of Mount Olympus. Zeus called a meeting of all the gods and goddesses. "This is very serious," he said in a voice that rolled like thunder. "Unless we can persuade Demeter to take care of the earth again, all of the people will die." "Pluto must let Persephone leave the underworld," said a goddess. "Only then will Demeter save the earth." Zeus called for Hermes, the messenger of the gods. "Go to Pluto and ask him, very politely, to return Persephone to her mother," he said. Hermes flew off at once. Only the gods and goddesses could go to the underworld, the home of all the people who had died and come out again. "I will never let Persephone go," growled Pluto. "I love her, and I want to marry her." "Please," Pluto begged Hermes, "please be reasonable. You know Persephone doesn't love you and won't marry you." "Very well," roared Pluto very angry. "I'll let her go if she hasn't eaten any food while she's been here. You know the rule. If she has eaten anything in the underworld, she must stay here forever." "That's easy," said Hermes. "Let's ask her." Persephone cried in answer to the question. "I couldn't eat anything here. I've never touched even the smallest crumb of food." A mighty ghost of a gardener was listening. "Oh, yes, you did," he croaked. "I saw you. You picked a ripe pomegranate and ate it." "No, no," cried Persephone. "I didn't eat it all. I was so thirsty I just swallowed a few of the seeds." "That's enough," shouted Pluto. "Please," Pluto begged Hermes, "let her go for a little while. A few seeds aren't that much." "Oh, all right," growled Pluto. "Persephone may go back to the earth for half of each year, but she must spend the other months here with me in the underworld." Holding Persephone's hand, Hermes flew with her out of the underworld to Demeter. "Oh, my darling daughter," cried Demeter, hugging Persephone. "You have come back to me at last." "Yes," sobbed Persephone, "but I must go back to the underworld for part of every year." Demeter knew she had to accept this. At once she looked young again. She put on her brightest clothes and began work, making new shoots of corn and grass grow and leaves open on the trees. It was spring all over the earth. All through the summer, Demeter was happy and busy, watching the fine harvest of corn and fruit. But when Persephone had to go back to the underworld, she was sad, and it became autumn. The leaves on the trees turned brown. The grass stopped growing, and the weather turned cold. It was winter until Persephone returned. Then Demeter was happy, and it was spring again. Did you like that story? Well, that's how the Greek gods and goddesses explain the 4 seasons. So what we learn from this myth is when Persephone is gone from the earth into the underworld, we have autumn and winter. And when she comes back, we have spring and summer. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and I'll read another one to you tomorrow night. Good night. Socks, can you say good night? Guess not. Sweet dreams.